Awesome. So, as Schultzy said, I'm Zach. I'm from WA, and I'm a first-year ministry and theology student, and I'm doing my placement here, which has been really awesome for the past year. So, thanks for having me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my testimony to start off with, and then I'll try and make it a little bit relevant to everyone else here, and we'll see how we go. So, I figured it out on the way here. I'm a sixth-generation Adventist, so been here for a long time, and the family's known God for a long time. And it's been a little bit different the way I came to be where I am here. So, growing up, I went to a church called Clarkson until I was about 5, and that was probably my first experience that I can remember. But I was really young, so obviously I couldn't remember much. But I remember doing Sabbath school. That was the first thing, and that was a big thing for me, learning about God. So you do Sabbath school like we do here. You go, you learn about God, and you get to be involved, and that was something really cool. And I'm going to jump through the first couple years because I don't remember much of it, but we'll get through and then we'll be able to talk about some more interesting stuff. So from there, I went to our campus church at the school where I was at. So I went to the school that Schultzy chaplained at, and that was called Lansdale Christian School, and we had about 80 kids go through when I was there, and that was kinder to year 7. So we did church there, and that was the first time that I got to be involved in church. I got to look after some music, which was really cool. Got to play the piano, and that side of things was where I got to see how God can really be used and how God shows himself through us through heaps of different means. It's not just Bible stories, it's music as well. And so went through there, got to do things like Pathfinders and Adventurers, got to go do heaps of cool things, and that was awesome. About 3 years after we started going there, we only had about 30 people that were going to that church. And a few had to move for jobs, and so we moved to this church called North Perth. And that was where, have you guys ever heard about how faith in children is just faith that their parents give them, and that's what they have, and it has to become their own for it to turn into something? That was about the time that I went to North Perth. So that was probably about year 4 and year 5. And once again, Sabbath schools became a really big thing. We had about 30 kids in our Sabbath school class, and that was for our high school and teens, and the room was about half the size of the young adults room. So you can imagine how small and how compact it was, and we're just jammed in there. And that was some of the best Sabbaths that I've ever had. We got to talk heaps with each other. We figured things out. We talked about the Bible. We talked about things going on at school, and we talked about God. It was different to how it would usually be. We wouldn't have someone going, okay guys, here's the lesson, and I'm going to teach you exactly what you need to know. It was more, okay guys, here's the topic we're looking at. What do you think? If we're looking at the Bible, if we're looking at a story of like Jesus' crucifixion, okay guys, what does this mean to you? What's going on here? We got to think it through. We got to argue with each other at some points. It got a little bit heated. We got to question each other. We got to connect with each other, and we got to figure it out together as a group. And that was one of the first times where, like, I'd known God throughout the whole time, but it became a little bit more real. It became a little bit more, this is actually something that you can live with, and it can actually be useful in your life. While I was going through this, and church was a massive help in learning about God, school was probably the biggest point for me. Going in high school, I was involved in music from year 7. One of my really good friends' older sister was looking after the music for the school. It's actually Cooper's cousin, Kaylee. She was looking after the music. And so she was like, oh, you play piano, let's get you involved. So I got to be involved in chapels, which was really cool. And they started this thing called Crosspoint. So at school, we would look after Friday night social, or like Friday night worship services. We'd look after Saturday night socials, so like going ice skating or doing whatever we felt like, and doing Sunday socials as well. And we just tried to build the school community. And in that school community, we'd have Jesus at the center. That's what we were looking for. We were wanting to make it a culture that everyone wanted to be a part of, but also that they could see Jesus in as well. So that was my first point in starting to lead and look after stuff, which I found to be really cool. When I was getting into around year 9, most of our older people were the ones looking after music, and they had all graduated, and so we were left a little bit empty on people doing stuff, and so we didn't have people to step up. So I said, okay, I'll step up. I'll start looking after our junior band. So I started to get more involved in chapels. We would be looking after icebreakers, all the music, and just making sure things like that ran really smoothly. And I thought, yep, you know what, this is somewhere that I'm really happy to be in. I'm happy to look after music, that side of things. Awesome, music's awesome. My family loves it. We'll listen to Cold Chisel or Billy Joel or anything during the week. Yeah, we just really love it. So I was like, yep, this is where I'm happy to be. But as it was starting to go through, I'm like, okay, I'm getting to year 10, and if you know me, I like to know what I'm going to do before I do it. So I was like, okay, I'm up to year 10, probably time to start thinking about ASAR subjects. Then what am I going to do? So my dad's an orthopedic technician, so he works in the hospital and he gets instruments ready for surgery, and my uncle's a nurse. And they used to talk about doctors that would come in from the country and they'd be like really cool people. They're like, it'll be hard to do, but that would just be a really cool job. So I'm like, I could do that. That'd be something fun to do. So I'm like, yep, I'll be a doctor. That'll be what I'm going to do. So I was like, okay, I'll start my ATAR courses early. So I started doing maths early. It's a little bit different for ATAR over in WA. The courses don't really line up the same way over here. But I was like, yep, I'll do that. I'll work through it. It'll be hard, but it'll be fun and rewarding. So I was like, yep, let's do it. Coming to the end of year 10 and the beginning of year 11, I started going, why do I want to be a doctor? Other than it being fun and being able to poke around in people, that would be pretty cool, and fix everything. That would be cool. But why do I really want to do it? So it came to, I just want to help people. I want to be able to serve people and for them to be better. So me being a doctor, I'd be able to help them. If they broke legs, arms, whatever it was, I'd be able to help them, and I thought that'd be really cool. About midway through the first term of year 11, our youth director, Pastor Willie, he gave me a ring and he's like, Zach, the AUC, or the Conference for Australia, they put on a youth program and it's called Chosen. If you haven't heard of it, it's where a bunch of youth come from around Australia and we spend a week together just talking about God, worshipping together, and a bunch of different things, and it just connects people from all around Australia. So I'm like, I get to go on a plane first to Brisbane, which will be awesome. We also got to go to Movie World on the way up, so I'm like, even better. So a free trip up to the Gold Coast to go to Movie World, then up to Brisbane, hang out for a week with a bunch of people. Like, it's a no-brainer. So I was like, yep, I'll be there 100%. I'll be there. That'll be absolutely epic. So I went there and it was life-changing. The experiences and the connections that that I made personally, it changed my outlook. It wasn't so much, yep, I'm happy, and helping people is 100% a great thing, but it was, okay, what does God want me to do actually? So I said to God, the ball's in your court. I'll do what you want me to do, but I want to be helping people. That's my criteria. I'll help people, but what do you want me to do? Whatever it is, I'll do it. So I continued through year 11. I was studying, I was putting in the work to try and keep ATAR up, which was not fun at times, but it's what it was. Lots of weekends studying, which, as lots of you would know, is not very fun, especially you guys coming up to HSC. It's not very fun at all. So going through that, studying, pushing hard, and then it came to the start of year 12, and I was going, okay, God, I'm still not exactly sure what you're wanting me to do, but I'll keep praying. I'll just pray whatever. If there's options for me to do stuff, I'll do it. I'll take it. Whatever it is, I'll just go for it. So we live about 5 minutes away from the beach, and so I would take the car and I'd just drive down to the beach and I'd sit in the car and I'd pray for half an hour at a time, an hour at a time, and I'd just go through the weekend. I'd take a Sabbath afternoon. When everyone else is having lunch and stuff, I'm like, yep, I'll go pray, and this will be the time where I've got time to do it. So I went down and I prayed, and I was like, okay, this is you. So it took a long time, and it took a while for me to find out the answer. Luckily, there was a teacher by the name of Gavin Bowyer. I can't really call him by his first name, it still sounds a little bit weird. So Mr. B or Mr. Bowyer was my history teacher for year 11 and year 10. And he also came to our church, so we would have lots of conversations like, okay, what do you want to do with your life? And there was starting to be like a little thought in the back of my head from being involved in chapels and looking after music and just being involved in that space where it was like chaplaincy or serving people like that would be something interesting. Like I really love doing it. And so maybe that's something there, but I was like, I'd seen some chaplains that had been treated pretty averagely and some pastors that had been treated pretty averagely, so I'm like, maybe not. So I put that off to the side a little bit. Then I got a couple opportunities to talk. We had a couple of school programs that went out to a couple of the churches and got to be able to talk there. And then we also had a couple of week of worships at school that I also got to talk for, which was really cool as well. Talking in front of people isn't my favourite thing to do. I'm happy to be behind an instrument and that's fine, but talking isn't my favourite thing. So I was like, okay, it's not what I like to do, but God, yep, that'll do it. I'll go for it, full send. And so a few people were coming to talk to me after. A couple of the chaplains were like, hey, have you thought about doing chaplaincy or ministry and going into that? And I'm like, kind of, but I hadn't really put too much thought into it. And they're like, you should really think about it. So I came home, I started praying about that even more. I'm like, okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, let me know, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I prayed and I just kept feeling it. I kept going, yes, I think this is what God wants me to do. And there were still people affirming it. So I'm like, oh, you know what, I'll go for it. So I put my hand in for early admission to get into Avondale, and then I got it. And so that is most of my story to get here, but we'll try and relate it into you guys as well. So we're all called by God, but what are you doing with it? That's my main thing for today. So if you guys want to turn to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 for me, and we'll have a look at that verse. I never realised how hard it would be to turn a Bible with one hand. Okay, so 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you might declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. We're all called by God, but what are you doing with that? Everyone is given a calling. It's not necessarily to be a pastor. It's not necessarily to be a chaplain. We're all called to different things. It can be a teacher. It can be a doctor. It can be just about anything. Whatever you're doing, it can be a calling. And as we can see in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 21, it says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. Every part of the body is really important, and it's all connected as well. Without your finger, or without your tendons in your arm, without the nerves, without the muscles, you can't move your finger. Every part is connected and is important for the other parts to still be able to do their job. There was someone when I was going to church at North Perth that made a big impact on me. I didn't realise it at the time, but he definitely had a big impact. It was a bloke by the name of Phil Barlas. He was the bass player for one of the bands inside of WA. And so he was one of the first people to include me at music when I was at North Perth. So he would come in and check on me. He'd be like, oh, Zach, we're going to do a jam session after church. Do you want to stay around? And I'm like, why not? Music sounds like a good idea. And got to hang out with mates at the same time, so why not? So he included me with that. Him and his family would come in and check every week. They'd be like, oh, how are you going? How was school? We're praying for you. All of this stuff. And it definitely had an impact. It wasn't just, oh yeah, the random, when you go to church and they're like, oh, I've been praying you or thinking about you this week. It was genuine and you could feel it and you're like, okay, they actually do care about me, which was something really special. Even if we have this calling by God, sometimes it's a little bit hard to know what it is. We've got stories of calling in the Bible. We've got people like Samuel that were called by God and God spoke to him. We've got people like Moses that were called from a burning bush. We've got dreams and visions. But sometimes, I haven't had a vision from God, I don't think. I haven't seen a burning bush that hasn't burnt up. If anyone else has, that would be awesome to hear about. But yeah, it's not something we usually see. There's a story in the Bible after Elijah has just been on Mount Carmel where God burnt up the altar and showed how much more powerful he was than Baal. Elijah, after just witnessing how powerful God was still scared by Queen Jezebel, who wanted to kill him. So as soon as he'd seen God's glory and his power, he still ran away. And so if you want to jump to 1 Kings chapter 19 for me, we see where it picks off on verse 11. Okay, and so from verse 11, Elijah's hiding in the cave at the moment, and God's just said, I'm about to pass by you, I'm about to go outside. So go outside the cave, and you'll see me pass by you. And so the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in an earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. There are all of these things that we hear in the Bible about, oh, God was in the fire, God was in this. But we see here that, yes, he was in those other times, but in this spot, he's not in all of these big things necessarily. It was in this still, quiet whisper that he heard. And sometimes when we're in the world that we're living in, whether we're doing school or work, we get caught up, we get very busy, and we don't have time to just sit still. We get guilty about just being like, oh, we're not doing anything at the moment, there must be something wrong. I need to be moving. So when we're like that, it's hard to try and just listen to God's voice that's coming from it. When we're in this busy world, we have to try and take time. We can't just go through our life and expect to hear it. We have to take time out of our busy days, our busy weeks, our busy months, and take time just to listen. Take time to just be still and to try and hear God's voice. So to wrap it up a bit, we need to take time. We've all got a calling, but what are you doing with it? Yeah. So we've all got a calling, but what are you doing with it? There are so many different things that we can be called to do and that we can do during the week. Sometimes it's through our actions, sometimes it's through our words. But to find and to figure out what it is, sometimes we just have to wait and listen and find out. So this week, try and think about, what are you doing with it? What's the calling that God's put on your heart? So we're going to go into some music, but yeah, through this week, just think about it. Just take time out and try and think about what God has called you to. Thank you.